What if I told you there was a philosopher so brilliant he came up with a revolutionary theory of everything, and then, years later, came back and said, actually, I was wrong, and then came up with a second revolutionary theory? Well, that's Ludwig Wittgenstein for you. He gave us two totally different ways to see the world, all by tackling the one thing we use constantly without even thinking about it: language.
This is probably his most famous line. It's kind of cryptic, right? But this single sentence is really the key to his entire philosophical mission, a mission to explore the absolute boundaries of what we can say and even what we can think. So, what on earth does it actually mean? Let's find out. You see, the really wild thing about Wittgenstein is that he wasn't trying to just add his own opinions to the big pile of philosophy. His goal was way more ambitious. He wanted to solve all of philosophy's problems for good. And his method? It wasn't to find new answers, but to show that most of these big questions are just illusions, tricks of the light caused by us getting tangled up in our own language.
Okay, so to really wrap your head around his work, you gotta know that there are basically two Wittgensteins. We have the first Wittgenstein, the young guy who writes this incredible book, thinks, yep, solved philosophy, and just quits. Then you have the second Wittgenstein, who comes back years later and basically says his first masterpiece was brilliant, but completely missed the point.
All right, let's dive into Act 1. This is the young, super confident Wittgenstein and his first major work, the Tractatus. This was his big swing, his attempt to build a perfect logical map of how language connects to reality. So, in this book, which is super short, by the way, but incredibly dense, Wittgenstein argues that he's found the one true logic that underpins language. He thought language could be a perfect mirror of the world, reflecting reality with absolute precision. The central idea here is what we call the picture theory. He said that for any sentence to actually mean something, it has to work like a picture. Now, it doesn't have to look like what it's describing, but it has to share its logical form, its underlying structure. And this quote right here, this is so key. For him, the world isn't just a big pile of stuff. You know, a cat, a table, a phone. The world is the arrangement of that stuff into facts. The statement, the cat is on the table, is a fact. It's a picture of reality. Just saying the word cat? Well, that's just a thing. It doesn't tell you anything about the world. Think about it this way. In a courtroom, an investigator might use little model cars on a map to show how an accident happened. That model works because the little cars are placed in the same relationship to each other as the real cars were. Wittgenstein said a sentence does the exact same thing, but with logic. It arranges names in a logical pattern that mirrors how real objects are arranged in the world. So if you follow this picture theory all the way to its logical conclusion, you run into a pretty stark reality. If language can only picture facts in the world, what about all the other important stuff we try to talk about every day? According to the Tractatus, the only things we can meaningfully say are things that can be proven true or false. You know, scientific statements, facts about the world. Everything else, our ideas about ethics, about beauty, about the meaning of life, is, strictly speaking, nonsense. Why? Because you can't draw a logical picture of good or bad. It doesn't correspond to a fact in the world. But here's the crucial thing. This didn't mean Wittgenstein thought ethics and art were unimportant, just the opposite. He thought they were the most important things in life, but they were transcendent. They were things that couldn't be said. They could only be shown, through the way you live your life. Language just wasn't the right tool for that job. And this is the question that started to eat at Wittgenstein himself. He built this perfect, beautiful, rigid palace for language. But he started to see that most of what we actually do with words just doesn't fit inside. So what then? And that brings us to Act 2, the return of the second Wittgenstein. After years away, he came back to philosophy, and he was ready to smash the very system he had so carefully built. His second great book, Philosophical Investigations, which was actually published after he died, just throws that whole idea of a single perfect logic right out the window. Instead, it dives headfirst into the messy, complex, and amazing reality of how we really use language. And this is where he gives us his other famous idea, language games. He realized language isn't a mirror, it's a toolbox. And inside that toolbox, there are tons of different tools, and you use a different one for every different job. I mean, think about it. Describing a fact, that's just one game we play with words. But we also use words to tell jokes, to ask questions, to give orders, to sing happy birthday. Each one of these is its own little language game with its own unwritten rules. You can't say a joke failed because it wasn't factually accurate, right? That's mixing up the rules of two different games.
And all of this leads to maybe his most profound insight from this period. The meaning of a word isn't some dictionary definition. It's just how we use it. Take the word game. What do board games, card games, and sports all have in common? It's hard to say, right? But we all know what game means because we know how to use the word in context. The meaning is the use.
So, just to sum up this massive shift, the first Wittgenstein saw language as a mirror. Meaning came from picturing facts, and everything was governed by one rigid logic. The second Wittgenstein saw language as a toolbox. Meaning comes from how we use words, and there are countless different games, each with its own flexible rules. Okay, so how do we square this? How can the same person produce two such brilliant but completely opposite philosophies? Well, this gets us to Wittgenstein's ultimate point about what philosophy is even for. This is the famous ladder metaphor from the end of his first book. He basically admits that the sentences in the Tractatus itself are, by his own rules, nonsense. He's telling us that the book isn't the final truth. It's a tool. It's a ladder you use to climb up and get a better view. And once you see things clearly from the top, you're supposed to kick the ladder away. And that reveals everything. For Wittgenstein, the point of philosophy isn't to build some grand theory of everything. It's more like therapy. Its real job is just to untangle the knots we tie ourselves in when we misuse our own language. You know, like trying to use a hammer when you really need a screwdriver. So I'll leave you with this to think about. From the way you say good morning to a coworker, to arguing with a friend, to telling a bedtime story, you're constantly, effortlessly switching between dozens of different language games every single day. And just recognizing that, well, that's the first step to seeing the world a little more clearly, just like Wittgenstein wanted us to.